Hello, welcome to week 6 of a 12-week series on redeeming marriage. My name is Steve Wiggum, and we're going to be talking about romance today. One of all of our favorite topics of all time, I'm sure. Matter of fact, most of our music and our movies and our books all have some kind of romantic tendencies to them, so it will not be very difficult for us to jump in right and talk about the subject head on. You know, if you've been following along, you know we've been through quite a few things already. This is the 6th week and the last of the theology of marriage. Next week we start with the practical marital living portion of our conversation, which allows us to look at Christian virtue and how we can apply it to our marriages. So let's just jump right in. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Princess Bride. I'm sure that if you've seen that before, you're probably already smiling because it's really one of those crazy, quirky, and delightful little films that were made. I recommend you're seeing it. It's just a kind of a mindless romp through the pursuit of true love. But really, that's what we want to talk about today: is what really is true love and romance, and how does it apply, and what should be the Christian's attitude in response to it. Is the current way we look at it in our current culture close to what the biblical mandate is to it, or has it been twisted and distorted? That's what we want to take a quick look at. Well, let's jump right in and I'm going to read a little bit of scripture to you. This one may surprise you. This is actually from a book in the Bible in the Old Testament. I'm going to read it to you, and then we'll talk about where it came from and what it's all about. But it's a poem written to a young maiden from Shulam, and this is how it goes. How beautiful are your sandaled feet, O queenly maiden! Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a skilled craftsman. Your navel is perfectly formed, like a goblet filled with mixed wine. Between your thighs lies a mound of wheat bordered with lilies. Your breasts are like two fawns, twin fawns of a gazelle. Your neck is as beautiful as an ivory tower. Your eyes are like the sparkling pools in Heshbon, by the gate of Beth Rabbim. Your nose is as fine as the Tower of Lebanon overlooking Damascus. Your head is as majestic as Mount Carmel, and the sheen of your hair radiates royalty. The king is held captive by its tresses. Oh, how beautiful you are, how pleasing, my love, how full of delights. You are slender like a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters of fruit. I said, I will climb the palm tree and take hold of its fruit. May your breasts be like grape clusters, and the fragrance of your breath like apples. May your kisses be as exciting as the best wine, flowing gently over lips and teeth. And if you've ever read, of course, the great Song of Songs in the Old Testament, you know that's a lift from chapter 7. Very steamy stuff, and if you're like me, it's kind of hard to read that without feeling a little bit of a rush coming in through you, because it is very explicit, very sexual, very, very tangible when it comes to human sexuality, and it's like, wow, that's in the Bible? Sounds like something out of 50 Shades of Grey. And it's really fascinating to think about that. I mean, why is that in the Bible? I mean, how do they get to the point saying this ought to be a part of our religious canon? But it is really fascinating that it's there. And the church has had a struggle with that book over many years. Matter of fact, there's one famous figure in church history named St. Bernard of Clairvaux. He lived in the 12th century, and he actually spoke 86 sermons on the Song of Solomon. And even the very first verse in the very first chapter that starts, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine," he somehow found a way of actually extracting that into 4 sermons. Now, naturally, St. Bernard, maybe he just was sexually repressed. I have no idea. I didn't know him personally. I don't think we even know that much about him on that personal level. But obviously he was fascinated by this book, and secondly, he really took the whole book as an allegory of Christ's love for his church. And that's an interesting take in and of itself. The book of the Song of Songs doesn't seem to have that direct contact between saying this is an allegory for God's love. But obviously the church has been trying to deal with it for many years. St. Bernard, of course, doing it more than anyone else, I think, in church history. But if you look back in our history, the church has had an awkward relationship with human sexuality. It hasn't always been a smooth road for the church actually to decide what's best and what's wrong, what's good, what's wrong, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and it has struggled. Matter of fact, in the very beginning of the church history, there was a heresy that came up was called Gnosticism, and it was really around the first couple of centuries after Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. And there are still some Gnostic Gospels that are available, Gnostic writings that have just been recently made available through the Nag Hammadi find back in the 1950s. And we found out a lot about the Gnostics through this discovery, but it also just mirrored a lot of things that Irenaeus told us, the great Christian patriarch back in the 2nd century AD. The Gnostics really had a struggle with the material world. Matter of fact, most of their worldview is that the things of this world can be very harmful to the soul. Matter of fact, the most important part of our experience should be in the spiritual realm, trying to actually free ourselves from the material world. And from that, the Gnostics, of course, took a very low opinion of worldly pursuits, even of human sexuality. A lot of them taught against the pleasure of human sexuality in the Gnostics. And we also see it bleeding over even into some of our more orthodox writers as well. We see that some of the early patristics had a rough time with the idea as well. It also went even further into the 4th and 5th century, where we see asceticism coming as a big part of Christian virtue, is that people really tried to deny themselves any kind of physical pleasure or physical anything to do with the physical world as being less than an ideal and also a hindrance to our spiritual growth. And so this became a real big battle. Now, they talked about things like mortifying the body and freeing yourselves from this world, and glory through humiliation, and also becoming worthy of heaven by just distancing yourself from earth. Matter of fact, the picture on your left, as you see here, is actually a Saint Simeon the Stylite in the 5th century. Now, Saint Simeon was an interesting character. He wanted to free himself from the pools of this world, and he actually found an old pillar that was a part of a ruins in Turkey, and he actually went and decided to live up there, being a little bit closer to heaven, a little bit further away from earth, to see if his spiritual life would be better. He actually stayed up on top of that pole for 37 years, and people from all over the Christian world came to see him and to learn from him, and he was praised for his otherworldliness, I guess you could say. But a lot of people copied him, and there were a lot of stylites that were actually started becoming almost like rock stars in the Christian community back in the early centuries. And this was and during this time we started seeing a lot of teaching about marriage, that having sex in marriage really was only useful and actually approved by the church in order to of course have children. Any other form of just just having pleasure in sexual intercourse was completely frowned upon as being lustful and full of all kinds of emotions and things that were contrary to good, healthy spiritual growth. Even more recently, just in our rearview mirror, Victorianism in the 1830s through the early 1900s, and also the Second Great Awakening in the U.S., contributed to some of our neuroses when it came to what was appropriate and inappropriate. And also you see a lot of a resurgence of things that anything that has to do with anything that brings any kind of physical pleasure was actually frowned upon. And so now the Victorian movement and the Second Great Awakening were fantastic movements that were very helpful to a lot of people, because the world was having a hard adjustment to living a life in an industrialized society, where we were actually starting to have to change the way we worked based upon machine time as opposed to the natural rhythms of life. I mean, machines ran 24/7 in many industries, so we actually had to adjust the way we worked to deal with the machines, whereas before we actually went out and harvested when it was time to harvest. We went to bed at night because there's nothing to do at night. But now the industrialized world changed dramatically, and a lot of alcoholism, a lot of prostitution, a lot of things started to really grow in the 1800s, and the Victorians and the Second Great Awakening. That's Charles Finney on the right-hand side, if you ever heard his name, one of the great great preachers of the time in the United States. And we saw that there was a growth and almost an abhorrence of things that were of the material world. And we still see it some today, and even some of the conversations we have. even some of the books I've been reading on marriage, I still see and hear, even in their language and how they've approached things, is a little bit of the spiritual life is so much higher than the physical life. And this has not been an orthodox position. And the fact that the Bible includes works like Song of Solomon in it kind of tell you that there must be something much more important to the material world that we should not shun as so quickly. So something to think about. Do your own investigation as you go into it, but you'll probably find some really interesting manifestations of this duality of our lives, that the physical world is actually stands in the way of our spiritual world, and that we should cleanse ourselves from any kind of physical passions, and even human sexuality, especially even including the marriage relationship. But when we start looking at marriage relationships, it's easy for us to assume some things and not others. Like when you see two couples, like who's more in love? When you see like the couple on the left, you see this couple has been dating maybe 4 months and they can't keep their hands off each other. And if you've been in the room with these people, you probably have felt a little bit awkward around them. Then there's also those on the other side, on the right-hand side, you see a married couple, maybe 40 plus years of age. They're very warm, but they hardly talk to each other even while they eat. So you see this kind of situation in restaurants, even out in the wild all the time. But who's really more in love? And that's a really fascinating thing to consider, because, if you think about it, the couple on the left, the young couple, they're in love. They're kind of got that rush of young love going through their veins. Whereas on the couple on the right are very much more stable and more mature in their love. And really, it's kind of the contrast of what it means to be in love versus just really, truly loving. And if you remember our conversations before, the kind of the in love feeling is really that fueled by dopamine love that has a lot to do with arousal and that rush, that crazy feeling we have. That song that we talked about, the Righteous Brothers, you lost that loving feeling. That whole rush of new emotions that come with new love is really this dopamine feeding the brain. And we know that dopamine actually just starts to wear off. We start having a hedonic adaptation to dopamine. And that way, that love does not last for a long time. So that's why we rewrote that song in an earlier lesson, if you remember, to you lost that rush of dopamine as opposed to that loving feeling, and it's gone, gone, gone. So the dopamine comes, it's a great feeling, flushing, your face gets warm, everything happens, your heart rate races, that's dopamine at work. But the more mature love actually is fueled by oxytocin, by gentle caressing and touching and just being near each other, gentle conversation. This is warmth and connection, and that's when oxytocin comes into play. And that is that what a lot of psychologists and endocrinologists call the cuddle hormone, oxytocin, because it does all that wonderful feeling. And if you've ever had somebody give you a back rub, you know that feeling of oxytocin right there. It just feels so good. That's the oxytocin rush. It's a lot different than dopamine, but it's actually very much of a bonding agent. And oxytocin does bond us to whatever is giving us that feeling. Let's jump right into what the Bible says about the romantic side of our existence. And one of the most telling verses, I think, is this one right here. It's Genesis 4, verse 1. I'm taking the New King James. It says, Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived. I always was not troubled, but just kind of curious about why would they use the word knew. I'm sure it was a euphemism to cover, the idea of this was actually, they had sex together. But it's really fascinating that they use the word knew. Matter of fact, this is the same word that you find elsewhere in the Old Testament when somebody knows something about somebody else, or God knew the hearts of men, or whatever. That same word is used here when Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived. And it tells us a lot about romantic love. And even though it may be a euphemism from way back then, but it actually still works for us. And so I think really one of the most important parts of romantic love for couples is to really know each other. And not just in the biblical sense, but truly know each other fully. And so what we're going to do is break this down a little bit, because I think there's a lot we can learn from this. So the first thing I do is like to look at the women's side of the equation, knowing what it is to be a woman. And for men, this is a very difficult place to go, because we don't quite understand women sometimes. And when we get to the men, of course, women are going to have the same response. But knowing what it is to be feminine is a really tough thing for a lot of people to understand. Sometimes even women themselves don't even understand themselves because they just know the feelings, they know what's happening, on the surface, but the deep down inner motivation sometimes is problematic to understand, and it's a very confusing world. But that's one thing I want to talk about is that what's really happening in women is they have this notion of this inner world experience. It's very deep for them. This is something that many men, including me, don't really understand because it's really not part of how we're made. We don't have a big inner world dialogue that's happening nearly to the extent that women do. And it's just this inner world that really is this very special place for women. And it's a constant, deep place they can go to sort out things, to make sense of things, to really grab a hold of ideas and feelings and negotiate them. Men have a rougher time making this happen. This is the reason why chick flicks are as they are. It's always about the inner struggle, the emotional chaos, the conflicts in the heart that really drive the narrative of most chick flicks, and why guys just don't seem to get it, and women can't understand it because it feels so relevant to them. And guys are saying, okay, where are the car crashes? Where are the explosions? Who's getting shot? It's a difference totally in psychology. Women get the chick flicks because it really talks to a very big and very important and deep part of their experience. And that can explain a lot of things right there. One thing we've learned about women is that there is an incredible depth of beauty and grace that they bring to the party. They have the ability of seeing beauty and being able to bring grace and comportment into life and make it just so special for society. And you see that anytime you be around women, they talk about how they decorate their houses, the way they dress, the way they apply their makeup, and it's just an incredible explosion of creative beauty that they are attracted to and that they can master. One thing that there's a dark side to it as well is because when it's threatened, there can actually this incredible desire for beauty and grace can actually lead into jealousy and tyranny. And women, you probably have experienced that when you feel threatened in your contribution of beauty and grace to the world, where somebody else has stepped in the way, and somebody who may be just a little bit prettier or whatever, you feel a little bit threatened by that. Sometimes it can lead to jealousy and tyranny. And this is an important thing. It's even happening inside your own heart. Sometimes you can get jealous of the things that you do. It's a really strange biography that women deal with, but their ability to bring beauty to anything is absolutely one of the most phenomenal parts of the woman's psyche. With that, women also have this incredible problem that they have to deal with, and it's this, is that usually a woman, she often feels like she's been put on a pedestal by the world. People admire her for her beauty, for her kindness or whatever. She's treated well, but she's also kept at a distance. In other words, she doesn't feel like she's totally understood and known, and it really creates a deep loneliness for her. This is why we find out in a lot of the stories that women enjoy most are the women who are just somewhat misunderstood. And they find that that need, that connection from other people to be one of the most prized parts of the story, that's what really drives them to completion. And so that's a really important part of the female psyche that we have to understand when we look into women's lives, that they sometimes have this huge struggle going on inside of them, that they are appreciated and they feel the appreciation, and they do appreciate how people feel toward them, but they still feel like they are in a glass case, like pushed aside and considered just almost sometimes even too beautiful. We saw the same kind of problem with the Marilyn Monroe. Here's a woman who had everything. I mean, obviously she was very attractive, she was very popular, very rich. It's not like everything anybody would ever want in this life, and all of a sudden she couldn't take it much longer, and she ended her life rather tragically. And it's a sad thing. I think that a lot of people who knew Marilyn Monroe saw her struggle with this, that she felt just so disconnected. And this is a real problem for a lot of women. You see it a lot with teenage girls as well. They just have this feeling of just no one understands me. And this is the battle going on within them. They're told that they're pretty, they're told that they're cute, and all these kinds of things, but yet still no one really gets who she is at her core. And it leads to a lot of emptiness and even to the point of loneliness and alienation. Another thing that women have to deal with is that they have this wonderful inner dialogue, but sometimes it can be very confusing to her. And it's hard to sort it all through. But what's appropriate or inappropriate? How should I act in these situations? And that's the reason why women like to talk things through, because they're dealing with these confusing voices in their head, and it's hard for them to grab a hold of them and make a lot of sense out of it. As we talk to women in our lives, men, we have to understand that there's a lot of this inner dialogue that's going on that sometimes that causes her to spin a bit. This is something we have to fully understand and grasp, and let her know that it's okay, that she can work it through, and that we're there for her and supporting her through the process. And that's a hard thing for sometimes we men to deal with, because we don't have all those voices in our head. We're fairly monochromatic, using a kind of an inappropriate term, but we're very singular in our focus when it comes to our own inner dialogue. So that's really an interesting thing for us to remember. There's also another part of women that really is a fascinating aspect, is that many women go through what we call a marriage remorse, and sometimes they don't even know it consciously. It's more of a subconscious thing to them, or even unconscious thing. It's just happening, and they feel sometimes these depths of despair. She can be grateful for a new relationship, but also she can mourn the death of maidenhood. She actually, when she looks at marriage, she sees two things happening: a death of a former to a resurrection of a latter. And those things are actually important to understand, because as women go through marriage, she can go through some conflicting emotions that she may not even be fully grasping. But as we understand her more, it can be a big help to help her through the process, because it is a big, big thing to her. And when she does commit to marriage, she goes all in, okay? And that's really what's really fantastic about women, is that they know how to really open themselves up to the relationship more than men know how to. Men can actually keep their marriage into a nice little box, and the rest of his life just continues to go as it is. She can get very confused and sometimes even shocked and annoyed by that, is that she notices that her man doesn't have the same commitment to the marriage as she does, and that's something that sometimes can be very discouraging to her. Another thing that's really important to understand is that women have this incredible gift of illuminating and creating meaning out of things. This is the reason why when the birthday is thrown, the Thanksgiving is planned, Christmas is all organized, and she brings so many touches to it that brings meaning and purpose and everything to the event that, wow, just makes all the sense in the world. And when a woman starts putting personal touches on her home and the way she does things, all of a sudden you see that there's just a lot of meaning attached to everything. We've found that men just absolutely need this, because they're not completely capable of their own to do these kinds of things. They actually need the women to step in and create that meaning, because it really centers them when the woman takes this kind of a role in the relationship. We have seen very bad things happen to men who are deprived of a woman's presence. There's an amazing story of men who were actually fighting at the Battle of Attu in World War II. Attu is a small island off of the coast of Alaska that gets really close to the Soviet Union's coastal area, an important strategic place for us to have an air base during World War II as Americans. And there were men stationed there for about 16 to 18 months with no interaction with any women. And we started to notice in their dealings with each other, and their whole attitudes toward life started to really get incredibly distorted. And we found out that the fact they were just not around women created problems for them. One thing that's also really special about women is that they know how to establish order from chaos. Sorting, organizing, prioritizing, these are wonderful gifts that many women carry within them. And it's, the fact that they have this closet organizing stores all around, and find out that most of the people who are buying are women. Not only is it just a physical space that they know how to organize, but they can organize feelings and values and time much better than men can. We have a rough time actually being able to create order from chaos. Women have a great capacity here. And some of those times, guys, we actually get a little bit frustrated because they are so organized about these things, and it's really foreign to us that it sometimes can create a little bit of stress. And this is why women like to sit down and just talk through their relationship. They're organizing all the feelings that are happening, whether positive or negative, and just kind of working them through. And guys, we ought to be a lot more patient with them because they're actually doing us a great service by making that happen. Another thing that's really important about women is that they have this incredible skill at the art of indirection. In other words, guys, we have a tendency just to go at it. I mean, when there's a thing on the table, a problem or a misunderstanding, we just jump on it and assume that's the best way to actually solve the problem. Women have a much more indirect approach and be able to actually kind of ease into things much better, and using kind of even to a point of craftiness, being able to get people to see things in different ways. And so the skill of indirection is really an important part of the female psyche that's really incredibly invaluable, because it allows people to accept ideas and new thoughts when dealing with them directly can sometimes create incredible barriers to making it happen. Another thing that's really critical for us to understand is that when it comes to issues of life, men have a tendency to compartmentalize them, women synthesize. In other words, when it comes to the synthesis that a woman has, is that all of her experiences and her roles in life become very intertwined. She as a mother, she as a wife, she as a co-worker, she as a friend, she as a sister, she as a daughter. All these things add together and they all work together. They're synthesized together in her mind. Men, on the other hand, have a way of compartmentalizing. This is my work life, that's my play life, that's my sex life, that's my whatever life, and he can just break them up and keep them in discrete bundles. That's the reason why sometimes when he is totally stressed out and is totally not feeling well about something else in his life, he can just shut it all down, turn to his wife, and want to have sex. Women, if they're having a real rough time at the office, or they have stress in the marriage where there's been an argument over things, those things are alive issues when sex is being discussed, and she actually can't get past it all until she deals with everything, because everything is all synthesized together. And this sometimes leads to a lot of frustration between men and women. Another thing we need to understand about women is that they love the art of seduction. This is one of their favorite things and one of the most important parts of the relationship. And they will actually mourn the fact if it's not available. She likes to be pursued, and she likes to know that we just don't take her for granted or just assume, well, she said yes, so therefore I could be lazy about seducing her. She'll go along with it all. But the seduction part of relationships are really critical to a woman. We ought to be very sensitive to that, guys, because it really can create all kinds of emotional barriers between husband and wife when we don't understand this incredible need that women have about being seduced. So it's time to put on our charm and become gentlemen again, I guess. It's an important part of the seduction process. Another part is actually foreplay. Yeah, it's a topic we hear a lot about, but it's not what most of us think. It's not just the physical, but it's also the emotional as well. Sometimes doing the dishes can be one of the best forms of foreplay because you're actually helping to deal with some of the stress in your woman's life. Men, when you actually say, hey, I'm going to help out here. I'm going to help with the kids. I'll bathe them tonight. This allows her to get relaxed and be able to focus on other parts of her life, including the romantic parts of her life. And so you're stepping up to do those things, and even your ability to listen to her when she's got problems, it actually really is a form of foreplay. So before the sex act, you got to think that all the things that you're leading up to, the emotional support you give her, the help around, the showing of appreciation that she is getting from you, all those things add up and really should be considered part of the whole foreplay of sex. And sometimes it can begin not just minutes before, but hours before, days before, even weeks before. So keep that in mind. It's really important to her that she actually helps synthesize all those things that are synthesized, that you help her to bring all the stress level down. And also, she just needs time. She's not like guys. Guys, we can just be touched by her, and a few seconds later, we're ready to go. For her, it takes a little bit more time and purposeness for it to all work. So keep all that in mind as you talk with her. Also, this is really important. Sometimes, guys, we just get kind of, we see our wives. Maybe she's just, been, helping with the kids or doing dishes, and she's just turning us on just by the way her hair and her smell and her laugh and all the things that you see all the way through the day, and it's really got you excited to be with her. And then all of a sudden you just, take that to the bedroom, and she's just like, what's going on? And she's not in the mood at all. See, the reason why a lot of times is she doesn't know what you're feeling. She just sees this act where you've just been watching TV just for the last 2 hours, and all of a sudden you're all amorous, and she can't quite figure it out. And you get frustrated because you really do care about her, but she's not seeing it, and she's actually giving you the stiff arm, and it's a really tough negotiation going on. It can lead to a lot of frustration and anger. What she needs to hear is how you're really feeling. That's really important to her, because that will bring her into the same kind of inner dialogue that's probably happening in your heart that you don't realize that she's not hearing. She's only seeing the superficial actions that you have. But tell her exactly why you're all excited, and lead her into that very gently, and you'll find out that that's really an important step. So maybe John Mayer had it right. We need to say what we need to say. Important. Also, another thing is the glorious benefits of kissing. It's amazing how important that is, both to men and to women, but even more to women. Women really learn a lot and actually are encouraged by the kissing process. It brings her close. Actually, there's a lot of communication that happens in kissing beyond just the act itself. First of all, our lips are extremely sensitive. There are a lot of things that run right to our brains from the lips. That's why we enjoy it so much. But secondly, the things that we smell, even the saliva we exchange in a kiss, is informing each other about who we are and where we are and in our emotional state, and it actually helps. Also, guys, just so you know this, that when you kiss your wife, you're actually giving her a little bit of a shot of testosterone, and testosterone actually gives her a little bit more sexual drive. So women, if you've ever been kissing your husband, all of a sudden you start to feel a little bit more amorous and you don't know where it's coming from, it's probably getting a testosterone kick that you weren't expecting. So it's important for us to remember that. But the most important thing you need to understand about women, guys, is that she craves strength more than anything. This is just what will melt her heart, is that she feels like she's married to a strong man. Not just a guy who can lift up the back of his car out in the parking lot. If you can do that, great. I can't. But also strength of character, strength of resolve, strength of commitment to the relationship. These ideas of strength are very important to her, because her inner world is a very vibrant place, and it's a lot of shifting and changing in her mind constantly happening. For you to come in as a strong voice in her head is a very calming and consoling thing to her. So give her that. Give her the strength, not just strength of body, which is also important to her, but also strength of character and of will. And that's something she really needs a lot from us. So keep that in the back of your mind. Let's turn to guys, knowing Adam. Now that we've learned a little bit about Eve, her makeup. Knowing Adam is a really fascinating thing, but actually it's a little bit shorter of a list of things to talk about. Guys were a little bit easier to deal with. The first thing you need to understand is that this whole idea of play fighting in boys, this is not just a nurture debate nature. It's actually deep inside of our psychology. And it really has a lot to do. So, you know how it is with little boys. They can make a sword or a gun out of anything. They can pick up a stick and all of a sudden it becomes a sword or a gun. They can, even a spaghetti noodle, uncooked spaghetti noodle can become a sword. It's just part of their world. And what it is, it really goes deep into the psyche of the masculine. And the fact that what happens within them is that they have this incredible ability to want to right wrongs. It goes deep all the way back to the very early parts of our childhood, guys. That's really important. And women, it's really important for you to understand this, is that when we see beauty, when we interact with things that are really important and very special, have almost it takes us to a whole nother existence, a transcendence. This affects us very deeply. And this is and anything that we have that just brings a deep beauty to us, whether it's the sunset or the seeing of the Rocky Mountains for the first time, or being at this ocean, or even just seeing just the beauty of things in the grass like this little boy. They become really our fair maiden. We're touched so deeply by beauty, but it wounds us. Matter of fact, there's a great mythology a story called The Fisher King. And what we find out is that men see these things, the rightness and the beauty of the world, and he sees that there's problems out there, that things are not happening, and he feels like he needs to be a part of this. This is what leads him to have this whole errant knight feel about his life, that he is on this mission, this pursuit of the Holy Grail, of fixing this world, but yet he is deeply wounded by just his own personality of not being able to do it. He's been wounded by the fact that he is mortal and that he is struggling and he's not quite living up to his capabilities. These things really plague a man very deeply. This is why men take it very personally when they lose their job. It's called his Fisher King wound, and it's with men all the time. And actually, that Fisher King wound actually becomes his drive in life. He can spend the rest of his life pursuing and conquering it just to heal his wound. And that's a really important thing for women to understand, is that a lot of the stress and the struggle and the anxiety that men feel is that this idea is that I've got this wound, I've seen the transcendent, and I need to fix it, and I just don't know exactly how. This is the reason why we are so captivated by sports and war movies, because they're just microcosms of the very thing that's struggling inside of our own hearts. Women, you don't understand. You think it's just voyeuristic craziness. It's just this lust for violence and all this kind of stuff. And it really is none of that at all. What it is, more than anything, is that it touches deeply into the fact that we have a Fisher King wound as well. We have to struggle through and earn the right to see and be with beauty. And one of the things you may not understand, women, is that you have an incredible healing effect on men. And very few women realize how great the hunger is for men to be near femininity. And sometimes you be around guys who are just kind of like talking trash about women. It's very popular in today's culture. And all that peacocking that you see really are men who really fear the feminine more than they actually devalue it. They're afraid of it because it's such a powerful force in their own heart and mind, so they actually try to put it down. So women, when you see these peacocking guys, realize that's what's going on. But deep down inside of all men is this incredible hunger to be near femininity. You don't feel the need for masculinity to the same visceral level as men feel toward femininity. So just know that. So when your husband, even though sometimes he cannot articulate it, but he just needs to be with you, even though he may not say anything to you, that it really is important to him. Another thing is that men have a rough time sorting through their inner life, and it puts them in deep, deep moods. Okay, we're not as capable as women are in being able to deal with the inner life, the struggles, the emotions, the conflicts. So we get into moods, and we actually just get very dark. And this happens a lot with men. And you've probably been around it if you've ever been married or been in a serious relationship over time with a man. Women, you probably have seen them drop into moods like this. What's really going to draw him out and be able to help him solve that is just the feminine presence that you have, that you can bring to him. That is just a healing to him. And it's not just throwing yourself onto him sexually, it's just being a woman around him can actually help him push through the mood. It may take time, it may not. It just all depends. Because he's not as skilled at navigating his inner world as she is. That's why he goes into moods. And it's hard for women to understand this because they have a mechanism to deal with the conflicts of emotion and feelings that are just going through their minds. Men don't have that capability. But your presence is what can really help men sort it out just by being there, and being feminine around him is really important. That helps him get a little bit more of that touch of meaning and understanding and purpose back into his life. It's very tempting for you to needle him when he gets in a mood. Just saying, what's wrong? How can I fix it? And all this kind of stuff. He really doesn't need all that. Your best strategy is to creatively use your femininity to guide him. Just by being a woman, just by being gentle and graceful and beautiful and all the things that you're just naturally gifted at doing, be there for him, and you'll be amazed at how his mood will start to self-correct. It's really kind of a fascinating thing. I've seen it in the life of me and Beth, my wife. She just has this ability. At times I've gotten so dark, all she had to be was just there. And her presence in my life was one of the things that really helped me get me through a really tough time, or a mood that I didn't even understand what was even causing it. There's a great irony about our relationship that we need to both understand, both men and women, is that sometimes men, we go to sex to relieve stress. Sometimes that can actually calm us down and get us centered again. Whereas for women, they struggle with sex when they're stressed, because remember, they are synthesizers. They open everything up in their lives, and when there's stress involved, it's hard for them to concentrate, bring all that energy and concentrate on being totally sexual at any given time. So it's a frustration for them. And it's hard sometimes for her to even realize what's causing her just not to be in the mood for sex. But sometimes it's just that there's just unresolved issues in other parts of her life that she just can't get out of her head enough in order for her natural sexual drive to be available. So keep that in the back of your mind, guys. It's really important. Women, just understand your own tendencies there and know why sometimes you just feel like you're just not in the mood. It's your self-awareness can be a big help in solving the problem. One thing we've learned is that the feminine touch can heal his Fisher King wound better than anything. So you're just being around, just touching him, being who you are. Women can be one of the most amazing things that can heal a man in his life and help him solve the struggles that he's incapable of solving on his own. Just remember this also, ladies, that above all, he craves meaning that she is ideally suited to provide. Your ability to bring all kinds of depth to the relationship just by being who you are, establishing meaning in everything, celebrating anniversaries and birthdays and Christmas and all these things, and bring meaning to everything, the way you even do morning kisses and all those rituals and things that you can celebrate together. Your ability to bring meaning to all that, even though he may not, sometimes he may even kind of laugh at you about it, but inside he is not laughing. He is just relishing. So sometimes he does that because he just doesn't, he's so amazed by your ability to do those things that he doesn't know how to handle it. But he absolutely is so appreciative of when you do those kinds of things on his behalf. So don't give up. Realize that's your wonderful gift. So enjoy that, and men, just really start to appreciate exactly what's happening. Be much more aware of your need for the things that she's doing, because it really is very special to you if you're truly honest with yourself. One thing that's really been fascinating through this conversation, we see there's such a wonderful balance between masculinity and femininity. It is such an incredible dualism that works so beautifully together. I think that's what God had in mind all along. Because remember, male and female, he created them. It's Genesis 1:27. And after he did that, God himself said, and behold, it was very good. He was pleased. He was very pleased with how this worked out. Hebrews 13:4 says, let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled. Such an important thing to remember. It's easy for us to distort the importance of this, but it's very meaningful for the wife, and it's very meaningful for the husband, for us to have a celebration of our married lives. So as you work together, to live life together, remember, strive to know each other better. Work hard at trying to figure out what does it really mean to be a woman. Guys, you should know this. And women, you should be very sensitive. So what does it really mean to be a man? And our understanding of each other will lead to such a great appreciation of each other, and also of the total marriage relationship, that will be very helpful. So get to know each other, not just casually, but even in the biblical sense. And I'll leave it at that.